Imagine this. You're only 10 years old, playing in the courtyard of your family's home in ancient Rome. The sun warms your face, your mother hums softly nearby, when suddenly, the sound of sacred horns pierces the air. Priests storm through the streets, and before you understand what's happening, you're ripped from your parents' arms, chosen to serve the goddess Vesta. Everyone calls it an honor. But what they don't tell you is this: you've just been sentenced to 30 years of fear, torture, and a fate far worse than death. Section 1. The day everything changed. Lucilla Marcia knelt in the courtyard, arranging her small collection of clay dolls in neat rows along the cool stone tiles. The morning sun streamed through the marble columns of her family's domus, turning the air golden and warm. Beyond the courtyard, she could hear her mother humming softly as she wove cloth on her loom, the rhythmic clicking of the shuttle a familiar and comforting sound. Her father's deep voice rumbled from the atrium, where he was speaking with 2 clients about grain shipments arriving from Ostia. It was an ordinary day in 61 BC, or at least, it seemed that way. Lucilla was only 10, but already she had learned that an ordinary day in Rome could change without warning. She was arranging her favorite doll, the one with the painted ivory face, when a sound pierced the morning air, the deep, resonant blare of ceremonial horns. It echoed through the narrow streets like a warning from the gods. Lucilla froze. Her mother's song stopped mid-note. Even her father's conversation faltered. From the street came a shout. "The Pontifex Maximus approaches!" Her mother dropped the loom shuttle with a clatter and ran into the courtyard, her face pale. "Lucilla, inside! Quickly!" She grabbed Lucilla's arm, tugging her toward the inner rooms. "What's happening, Mama?" Lucilla asked, bewildered. "Why is everyone afraid?" Her mother's hands trembled as she pulled her close. "Don't speak. Just hide." Before they could move, a procession appeared at the gate. Leading it was an old man draped in a gleaming white toga edged with purple, Marcus Fabius, the Pontifex Maximus, the highest religious authority in Rome. His stern face was unreadable as he raised a golden staff. Behind him marched priests, attendants, and guards. Lucilla clung to her mother's skirts, peeking out as the man's gaze swept over the courtyard. He looked at each child. Her younger cousins, the neighbor's daughter who had come to play, with cold, appraising eyes. Then his gaze landed on her. The world seemed to stop. The hum of bees in the garden, the cries of vendors in the street, even her own heartbeat, everything went silent. The Pontifex raised his staff and spoke words that made her mother collapse to the ground, sobbing. "This child shall serve the goddess Vesta." Lucilla blinked in confusion. She had heard of the Vestal Virgins, holy women who tended the eternal flame in the temple. She thought it sounded like a great honor. Why, then, was her mother wailing as if someone had died? Her father stood rigid, his face ashen. He did not move, did not speak. Because everyone knew, refusing the Pontifex's decree meant death for the entire household. "Mama?" Lucilla whispered. "Why are you crying? I get to serve the goddess. Isn't that good?" Her mother clutched her so tightly it hurt. "Oh, my little one," she sobbed. "You don't understand. They will never let you come home again." Lucilla's heart thudded. Never come home? That couldn't be true. It couldn't. But before she could protest, the guards stepped forward, prying her from her mother's arms. Lucilla screamed, reaching out as her parents faded into the distance, their figures blurring through her tears. And just like that, her childhood ended. Section 2, The House of the Goddess. Lucilla's cries echoed down the narrow streets as the procession carried her through the heart of Rome. She struggled in the grip of the guards, but they were unyielding, their hands like iron. Her pleas for her mother and father went unanswered. The citizens who lined the streets bowed their heads as the group passed, murmuring prayers to the goddess Vesta. Why are they bowing? Lucilla sobbed, kicking helplessly. Why are they looking at me like that? I just want to go home. One of the attendants, a tall woman with severe features and gray-streaked hair, looked down at her with something like pity, or perhaps disdain. Silence, child. From this moment on, you belong to the goddess. You will speak only when commanded. Lucilla's eyes widened. Belong to the goddess? She didn't understand. She didn't want to understand. She wanted her dolls, her mother's warm hands, her father's laughter. The streets grew narrower until they opened into a vast plaza filled with towering temples and bustling crowds, the Forum Romanum, the beating heart of the empire. There, standing like a jewel amid the marble grandeur, was the Temple of Vesta, its round roof shining in the sunlight. Behind it loomed a sprawling complex of elegant buildings with high walls and guarded gates, the House of the Vestals. The moment they entered, the world seemed to change. The air was cooler, heavier, filled with the faint scent of incense and oil. Marble columns rose on either side of a long courtyard lined with statues of serene, veiled women. Lucilla clutched at her tunic, trembling. The older woman, her new guardian, though Lucilla didn't know it yet, guided her forward with an iron grip on her shoulder. "Kneel," she ordered. Lucilla obeyed, tears streaming down her face, as the Pontifex Maximus raised his hands. "Today," he proclaimed, "the goddess has claimed another daughter. This child shall take the name Aurelia, for she will shine as pure and untouchable as gold." Aurelia? Lucilla's mind spun. That wasn't her name. "My name is Lucilla." She wanted to shout, but her voice caught in her throat. From that moment on, no one would call her Lucilla again. Her birth name was erased, along with her rights as a daughter and citizen. The ceremony was brief and terrifying. Priests chanted as attendants cut away her childhood tunic and replaced it with the plain white robes of a novice Vestal. Her hair was unbound and braided in an intricate pattern resembling that of a bride, though this was no wedding. It was a symbolic severing of her ties to ordinary life. When the chanting ended, the older woman knelt beside her. "I am Marcellina, Chief Vestal," she said coldly. "From this moment you answer to me. You will learn our laws, our rituals, and our sacred duties. Obedience is your only path to survival." Lucilla, Aurelia now, nodded frantically, terrified of angering her. Marcellina's eyes softened just for a moment, a fleeting glimpse of something human beneath the stern exterior. "Do not cry, child. The goddess watches all. Your tears are wasted here." But that night, when Aurelia was led to her sleeping chamber, she cried silently into her pillow, whispering her true name like a forbidden prayer. Section 3. Lessons of Fire and Fear. Days turned into weeks, though Aurelia could no longer tell how much time had passed. The House of the Vestals was both beautiful and suffocating. Its gardens overflowed with flowers, its halls gleamed with polished stone, but every door was guarded, every corridor watched. The other novices ranged in age from 6 to 10. Some were silent and hollow-eyed, others openly rebellious until they were punished into submission. Aurelia quickly learned that the walls had ears. A careless word could lead to whispers of discipline, a word that filled the younger girls with dread. Training began at dawn each day. The first and most sacred task was tending the eternal flame in the temple. Marcellina herself explained its significance. "This fire," she said, standing before the round hearth at the temple's center, "is the life of Rome. As long as it burns, the empire endures. Should it ever be extinguished, it is not merely the temple that fails, it is all of Rome." The other girls bowed their heads reverently. Aurelia stared into the dancing flames, mesmerized, and felt a strange mix of awe and terror. "Your first law," Marcellina continued, "is perpetual virginity. For 30 years you will remain untouched, for you are the bride of Vesta herself. Second, you will obey without question the Pontifex Maximus and the senior priestesses. Third, you will guard this flame with your life." Aurelia swallowed hard. 30 years? She couldn't even imagine 30 days. That evening, she whispered to another novice, a girl named Flavia, as they cleaned the temple floor. "Do you miss your family?" Flavia's hands stilled on the brush. She was older, perhaps 11, with sharp green eyes. "I don't remember them anymore," she said flatly. "It's easier that way." "But what happens if we make a mistake?" Aurelia asked. Flavia's expression darkened. Pray you never find out. The next morning, Aurelia learned why. A senior Vestal discovered a faint wisp of smoke curling upward from the sacred flame, a sign that it had nearly died during the night. Though no one knew who was at fault, the entire temple was thrown into chaos. Guards dragged one of the older novices, a trembling girl named Severa, into the temple's underground chambers. Hours later, muffled cries echoed through the stone halls, followed by an eerie silence. When Severa returned, she could not walk. Her eyes were blank, her lips sealed tight as though words had been ripped from her. Aurelia understood then, mistakes were not merely punished. They were annihilated. Section 4. The Punishment Beneath the Temple. Aurelia lay awake that night, staring into the darkness above her bed. Sleep refused to come. Severa's blank eyes haunted her, replaying again and again in her mind like a cursed vision. The other novices whispered fearfully in their beds. "What did they do to her?" one murmured. "Shh!" hissed another. "If the matrons hear us." But Aurelia couldn't stop listening. Her heart pounded as Flavia's quiet voice slipped through the darkness. "My sister, she told me before I came here. It's called the flagrum obscurus. The dark scourging." A sharp intake of breath followed. Even the youngest girls knew the name, though none dared speak of it openly. Flavia continued, her tone grim. "If the flame weakens, someone must be punished. Even if it wasn't their fault. The Pontifex says the beating drives out corruption, keeps the goddess pure." "But Severa didn't bleed," Aurelia whispered. She remembered the way Severa's white robe had been immaculate when she was carried back to the dormitory. "I saw no marks." "That's the point," Flavia said bitterly. "They strike in ways no one can see. So no one can prove what was done." Aurelia buried her face in her pillow. Her body trembled so violently she thought she might shatter apart. The following day, Aurelia was summoned to the central courtyard. Marcellina stood waiting, her white veil glimmering in the sun. Around them, statues of past Vestals gazed down with cold marble serenity. "You will tend the flame tonight," Marcellina said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes bored into Aurelia's soul. "Do not let it falter. Remember Severa." Aurelia nodded quickly, too afraid to speak. That night she sat alone in the temple, the only sound the crackle of fire, and the faint rustle of her own breathing. The flame seemed alive, shifting and twisting as though it could sense her fear. Every few moments she rose to feed it oil and offerings, terrified that even a single flicker might betray her. Her mind drifted back to her family. Were they thinking of her now? Did her mother still weep every night? She imagined her father sitting silent at dinner, her empty seat a wound that never healed. When dawn finally came, Aurelia's knees buckled with exhaustion. The flame still burned strong. She had survived her first vigil. But in the shadows near the temple door, Marcellina's voice cut through her relief. "Good. You have proven yourself, for now." The way she said "for now" made Aurelia's stomach twist. Section 5. The Procession of Shame. 2 months later, Rome buzzed with rumors of scandal. Whispers spread through the house of the Vestals like a creeping sickness. One afternoon, Marcellina gathered the novices in the courtyard. Her expression was unreadable, but the hard set of her jaw told Aurelia something terrible was coming. "Today," she announced, "you will witness the consequence of the greatest sin a Vestal can commit. Let it sear into your memory, for this fate awaits any who defile their vow of chastity." Flavia's hand brushed against Aurelia's, trembling. Guards escorted the girls through the crowded streets until they reached a wide open space near the city walls. There, a massive crowd had gathered, their murmurs rising like a storm. At the center of the field stood a wooden platform surrounded by priests. Upon it knelt a young woman in pristine white robes. Her hair was braided like a bride's, flowers woven into her veil. Aurelia's breath caught. She recognized the woman, Verenia, one of the senior Vestals. "Why is she dressed like that?" Aurelia whispered. Flavia's voice was barely audible. "Because she is being wed to death." Marcellina's cold voice rose above the crowd. Varinia has been found guilty of sacrilegium, pollution of the sacred order. She has shamed the goddess and endangered Rome itself. Now she will return to the earth from which she was born. The words meant little to Aurelia, but the horror in Flavia's eyes said enough. A procession began. Varinia was led slowly down a narrow staircase that disappeared into a deep pit. She did not scream, did not fight. Her face was eerily calm, though tears streaked her cheeks. Priests followed with offerings, bread, water, oil. They placed them carefully inside the chamber at the bottom of the pit. Why are they giving her food? Aurelia asked, confused. So they can pretend it's not execution, Flavia said bitterly. The priests say she has a chance to live. But there's no air down there. She'll suffocate long before the bread is gone. Aurelia swayed on her feet, nausea rising in her throat. When Varinia reached the bottom, the staircase was dismantled plank by plank. Workers shoveled dirt over the opening, sealing it shut. The crowd fell silent as the last trace of the woman vanished beneath the earth. Marcellina's voice rang out. Let all Rome remember this day. The goddess's will is fulfilled. But Aurelia couldn't hear her anymore. The roar of her heartbeat drowned out everything. She clutched Flavia's arm, certain she would faint. And then she understood, truly understood. There was no escape. Section 6, Cracks in the Stone. That night, Aurelia lay curled in her bed, wide-eyed and shaking. Varinia's calm face haunted her more than the burial itself. How could someone walk into their own grave without a scream, without a single word of protest? The dormitory was silent except for the occasional muffled sob. Flavia lay beside her, staring up at the ceiling. They didn't even say his name, Flavia whispered suddenly. Aurelia turned to her. Whose name? The man they accused her of breaking her vow with. Flavia's voice trembled. He was probably executed too. They always kill the man, but they do it quickly. The woman suffers slowly. Aurelia's stomach churned. Slowly was an understatement. Flavia, she said softly, do you think Varinia really broke her vow? Flavia hesitated, then shook her head. No. The priests make accusations whenever it suits them. Maybe someone powerful wanted her gone. Maybe she displeased Marcellina. It doesn't matter if it's true. The hopelessness in her friend's voice was like a stone sinking in Aurelia's chest. Days passed, but the terror remained. The temple felt different now, its beauty tainted by the memory of the burial field. The eternal flame seemed almost mocking, its light casting long, sinister shadows across the marble floor. Aurelia began to notice things she had ignored before. The way the guards' eyes followed them, cold and watchful. The hidden passages beneath the temple, their entrances concealed by heavy drapes. The haunted looks of older Vestals, their faces expressionless but their hands trembling ever so slightly. Most unsettling of all was Marcellina herself. She had always been stern, but now her presence seemed suffocating. You are vessels of the goddess, she told them one morning, her voice like iron. Empty yourselves of desire, of doubt, of self. Only then can the flame remain pure. As she spoke, Aurelia realized something terrifying. Marcellina believed every word. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was devotion twisted into madness. That evening, as Aurelia swept the temple steps, she overheard two priests speaking in hushed tones. Another extinguishing, one muttered. The flame faltered again last night. Unacceptable, the other hissed. Perhaps it is time to select a scapegoat. The people grow restless. Aurelia froze, her broom clattering to the ground. A scapegoat. Someone would be blamed, and punished, even if they were innocent. When she told Flavia later, her friend's face went pale. We have to be careful, Flavia whispered. If they choose one of us. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. For the first time, Aurelia felt something stirring beneath her fear. Not hope, not yet, but anger. They think they own us. They think we'll break, like Severa, like Varinia. But I won't. I can't. She clenched her fists beneath her robes. I'll survive this place. She swore silently. Even if it kills me. Section 7. Shadows of Rebellion. Weeks turned into months. Aurelia learned the rhythms of the temple, the rituals of worship, the exact timing of the flames tending. Outwardly, she was the perfect novice, obedient, silent, devout. But inside, her anger grew. One night, while delivering offerings to the temple storeroom, she stumbled upon a narrow door half hidden behind a hanging tapestry. Curiosity gnawed at her. After glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she slipped inside. The air was damp and musty. A steep staircase spiraled downward into darkness. At the bottom lay a cramped stone chamber filled with discarded robes, broken ritual tools, and chains. Aurelia's breath caught. This was where they brought girls for punishment. She could almost hear Severa's muffled screams echoing off the walls. She backed away, heart pounding, when a voice spoke behind her. Curiosity is dangerous, little one. Marcellina stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by torchlight. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned like coals. You wish to understand our justice? You will in time. Aurelia stammered. I was lost. Forgive me, Lady Marcellina. Marcellina studied her for a long, terrible moment. Then, to Aurelia's surprise, she reached out and gently cupped her chin. You are clever, the High Vestal murmured. Too clever, perhaps. Clever girls survive, if they learn when to be silent. With that, she released Aurelia and turned away, her robes whispering against the stone floor. Aurelia fled back to the dormitory, her legs shaking. Flavia was waiting, her face pale with worry. What happened? They have a place beneath the temple, Aurelia gasped. For punishments. She broke off, unable to finish. Flavia's lips pressed into a thin line. I've heard whispers of it. No one who goes down there ever comes back the same. Aurelia sat on her bed, clutching her knees. She knew now that survival alone wasn't enough. If she ever wanted freedom, she would have to outsmart Marcellina. And she would have to do it soon. Section 8. The Final Flame. Aurelia's resolve hardened like iron in the days that followed. Every moment in the temple was a battle. Not of swords or shields, but of silence, cunning, and survival. She watched, listened, and learned, pretending to be the perfect novice while secretly plotting her escape. But fate struck first. One frigid night, a violent windstorm swept through Rome. The temple's sacred flames sputtered and nearly died before dawn. By morning, panic rippled through the house of the Vestals. Priests muttered accusations, guards doubled their patrols, and Marcellina's fury burned hotter than the fire itself. Someone allowed the flame to falter, she hissed to the assembled novices. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glittered with wrath. The goddess demands punishment. Rome demands a scapegoat. Her gaze swept over the group and landed on Flavia. You, Marcellina said, pointing a pale finger. No! Aurelia burst out before she could stop herself. It wasn't Flavia. She was with me all night, tending the offerings. She couldn't have. The courtyard went silent. Every head turned toward Aurelia. Marcellina's lips curved into a cold smile. Then perhaps you are guilty, Aurelia. Perhaps the goddess has revealed her chosen sacrifice. Aurelia's blood turned to ice. She had spoken too quickly, too boldly. Now she had placed herself directly in Marcellina's sights. That evening, guards dragged Aurelia down into the hidden chamber beneath the temple, the one she had discovered weeks before. The air was damp and foul, the walls lined with chains and hooks that gleamed in the torchlight. Marcellina stood waiting, her shadow looming large against the stone. You disappoint me, she said softly. You could have been the greatest among us. Instead, you let rebellion fester in your heart. I only wanted to protect my friend, Aurelia said, her voice trembling but defiant. Friendship is weakness, Marcellina spat. There is only service to the goddess. Two guards bound Aurelia to a wooden frame. A leather gag was forced into her mouth, silencing her cries. The ritual scourging began, rods striking in precise patterns meant to cause unbearable pain without leaving visible wounds. Aurelia's vision blurred. Her body screamed. But her mind clung to one thought: I will not break. I will not give her that victory. As dawn approached, the punishment ceased. Aurelia was left barely conscious, her body trembling. Marcellina knelt beside her. You will tend the flame one final time, she whispered. If it falters again, Rome will know the goddess has judged you unworthy. The irony was cruel. Marcellina herself had ordered the flame secretly extinguished during the night, ensuring Aurelia's failure. But Aurelia had been planning for this. Even in agony, she summoned the strength to crawl toward the hearth. She poured oil, whispered the forbidden words her mother once taught her, and struck flint. The fire roared back to life, brighter than ever before. The crowd gasped. Priests fell to their knees. Marcellina's face twisted with fury. Impossible! She hissed. This girl is cursed. No, Aurelia said hoarsely, ripping the gag from her mouth. The curse is yours. You have used fear to control us, but the goddess sees the truth. The crowd murmured. Doubt spread like wildfire. Some of the older Vestals stepped forward, their own resentment boiling over. She speaks true, one said. Marcellina has twisted our vows for her own power. The Pontifex Maximus himself, drawn by the commotion, descended into the temple. Upon seeing the flame blazing and hearing Aurelia's testimony, he turned on Marcellina with cold authority. You have brought shame upon the goddess, he declared. For this, you shall suffer the fate reserved for the worst of traitors. Marcellina's screams echoed through the forum as she was dragged to the very burial field where she had condemned so many others. The earth swallowed her as the people of Rome watched in grim silence. When it was over, Aurelia stood before the eternal flame, her body bruised but unbroken. The Pontifex approached. You have served Rome well, he said. You are free to leave this place. Free. The word felt unreal. Aurelia looked at Flavia, who was weeping with relief. Together they stepped out of the temple gates, leaving the house of the Vestals behind. As the morning sun rose over Rome, Aurelia whispered her true name for the first time in years. Lucilla. She vowed never to let the world forget the truth of what had happened within those marble walls. For though she had escaped, countless others had not. And somewhere deep beneath the temple, the shadows of their suffering still lingered, a warning for all who believed that fear could be mistaken for faith.